r/petty revenge neighbors mocked me after their dog attacked, so I got revenge. The pit bull's teeth sank into my forearm before I even had time to scream. 1 second I was walking down the hallway of my apartment building, keys jingling in my hand after a long day at work. The next, I was on the ground with 70 pounds of muscle and fury latched onto my arm like I was a chew toy. The pain was immediate and blinding, a white-hot explosion that made my vision blur around the edges. Zeus, no. Bad boy. Sarah's voice echoed through the hallway, but she sounded more annoyed than concerned. Like her dog had just knocked over a houseplant instead of mauling her neighbor. The dog finally released me when her boyfriend Marcus yanked hard on the leash, and I scrambled backward against my apartment door, clutching my arm. Blood was seeping through my fingers, staining my work shirt a dark crimson. Oh my god, I gasped, staring at the puncture wounds. The dog had torn right through my sleeve and into the meat of my forearm. I could see the individual tooth marks, deep and angry. He's usually so friendly, Sarah said, not even kneeling down to check if I was okay. She was too busy baby-talking to Zeus, who was wagging his tail like he'd just performed the best trick in the world. You must have startled him or something. Must have startled him. I was walking down my own hallway, minding my own business. I hadn't even looked at their dog, let alone done anything threatening. But as shock gave way to throbbing pain, I couldn't form the words to argue. I think I need stitches, I managed to say, struggling to get to my feet. The bite was deeper than I'd initially thought, and blood was dripping onto the carpet. Marcus shrugged. Dogs will be dogs. You'll be fine. That should have been my first clue about what kind of people I was dealing with. No apology. No offer to help. No concern for the fact that their friendly pet had just attacked an innocent person. They acted like this was a minor inconvenience for them. I need to get to urgent care, I said, fumbling for my phone with my good hand. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and the pain was becoming unbearable. Well, we're late for dinner, Sarah said, tugging Zeus toward the elevator. Hope you feel better. And just like that, they were gone. No exchange of contact information. No acknowledgement that their dog had done anything wrong. They left me bleeding in the hallway like it was just another Tuesday. I managed to drive myself to urgent care with my left hand, my right arm throbbing with each heartbeat. The doctor who stitched me up, 7 stitches total, asked if I'd reported the bite to animal control. Not yet, I said, wincing as he pulled the thread through my skin. You should. Any dog bite that requires medical attention needs to be documented. It's the law. As I sat in that sterile room, watching him sew my arm back together, something hard and cold settled in my chest. It wasn't just about the bite anymore. It was about their complete lack of accountability, their dismissive attitude, their assumption that they could just walk away without consequences. I had no idea that this was only the beginning. That Sarah and Marcus were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives by underestimating exactly how far I was willing to go to make sure this never happened to anyone else. The first text showed up on my phone while I was still in the urgent care parking lot, my freshly bandaged arm throbbing in a sling. Hey, heard you had a little incident with Sarah and Marcus's dog. Hope you're not planning to make a big deal out of it. Zeus is a sweetheart, probably just got excited. These things happen. It was from Jenny, who lived 2 floors down. I stared at the message, my stomach dropping. How did she already know? I'd been at urgent care for less than 2 hours. My phone buzzed again. This time it was from Derek in 4B. Dude, seriously? You're going to report a dog for being a dog? That's pretty dramatic, don't you think? Then another from someone I barely knew in the building. Sarah told us what happened. Maybe next time don't approach strange dogs so aggressively. Just saying. Aggressively? I was walking down my own hallway with groceries. I hadn't even acknowledged their dog existed. By the time I made it back to my apartment, my phone had blown up with messages. Sarah and Marcus had apparently spent their dinner spinning the story, painting me as some kind of dog-hating monster who had provoked their gentle giant. According to their version, I had lunged at Zeus and scared him into defending himself. The lies were so blatant, so infuriating, that my hands were shaking as I scrolled through message after message. Half the building was now convinced I was the problem. That I was some drama queen making a mountain out of a molehill. I was still processing the texts when I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Through my door, I could make out Sarah's laugh, that high, fake giggle she used when she wanted to seem innocent. I know, right? He's acting like Zeus tried to kill him or something. It was barely a scratch. Poor Zeus was probably terrified, Marcus added. The guy came at him out of nowhere. What was Zeus supposed to do? A third voice, Mrs. Peterson from next door, clucked sympathetically. That poor dog. Some people just don't understand animals. I pressed my back against the door, my good hand clenched into a fist. 7 stitches was barely a scratch. I came at their dog out of nowhere. The gaslighting was so complete, so shameless, that I felt like I was losing my mind. But the worst part was hearing Mrs. Peterson, sweet, elderly Mrs. Peterson who always smiled at me in the elevator, completely buying their story. How many other neighbors had they convinced? How many people in this building now thought I was some kind of lying troublemaker? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Zeus's teeth coming at me. But worse than the flashbacks were the phantom notifications from my phone. Each buzz made my heart race, expecting another message from a neighbor who'd been turned against me. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. No signature, but the handwriting was definitely Sarah's. I'd seen it on packages in the mailroom. Maybe you should consider moving somewhere more suited to your delicate constitution. Some of us actually like living in a drama-free building. I stood there in my doorway, holding that note, and felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, the anxiety about every dog I might encounter. But underneath it, something else was growing. Something harder and more determined. They wanted to play games. They wanted to rewrite history and turn my neighbors against me. They thought they could intimidate me into staying quiet about what their dangerous dog had done. They had no idea who they were messing with. I thought the worst was over after the note under my door. I was wrong. The next evening, I was coming home from my follow-up appointment with the doctor when I heard laughter echoing through the lobby. There, clustered around the mailboxes, were Sarah, Marcus, and 3 other residents I recognized from the building. They were all staring at someone's phone screen, practically doubled over with amusement. "Oh my god, that's perfect," gasped Linda from 3C, wiping tears from her eyes. "You should totally post this on the building Facebook page." My blood ran cold. Our apartment complex had a private Facebook group for residents to share announcements and complaints. I hadn't checked it since the incident. As I tried to slip past unnoticed, Marcus looked up and spotted me. His grin was predatory. "Hey, speak of the devil. We were just talking about you." He held up his phone, and I caught a glimpse of what looked like a meme. "Sarah made this. It's hilarious." Before I could respond, Sarah had pulled out her own phone. "Oh, you have to see this. I'm so proud of it." She turned the screen toward me, and my stomach dropped into my shoes. It was a photo of a tiny chihuahua with a dramatic bandage wrapped around its entire body, captioned, "When you're so tough you need 7 stitches from a friendly hello." Below that, in smaller text, "Drama Queen of Oakwood Apartments." The group erupted in fresh laughter as I stared at the image. They'd turned my attack into a joke. My genuine trauma had become their entertainment. "The comments are even better," Marcus said, scrolling through his phone. "Brad from 5A said he's going to start a GoFundMe for your emotional support hamster. And Jennifer suggested we get you a helmet for walking down hallways," Linda added between giggles. "You know, for safety." I felt heat rising in my cheeks, a mixture of humiliation and rage so intense I thought I might vomit. These people, my neighbors, people I'd shared elevators and small talk with for 2 years, were mocking me for being the victim of a dog attack. That's not what happened," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, come on," Sarah said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Zeus wouldn't hurt a fly. You're making this whole thing so much bigger than it needs to be. It's honestly embarrassing at this point." "Embarrassing for who?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Marcus stepped forward, and I instinctively backed up. "Look, we get it. You got scared. But dragging this out, talking about animal control, making Zeus out to be some kind of monster, it's pathetic, man. Just move on. The whole building thinks you're being ridiculous," Sarah added with fake sweetness. "Maybe it's time to admit you overreacted." They were all staring at me now, waiting for me to back down. To agree that my 7 stitches were no big deal. To apologize for having the audacity to be attacked by their precious Zeus. 53 comments, Linda said, looking at her phone. "I think that's a building record." 53 neighbors laughing at my expense. 53 people who thought my trauma was comedy gold. I didn't trust myself to speak. Instead, I turned and walked toward the elevator, their renewed laughter following me like a pack of hyenas. As the elevator doors closed, I caught Sarah's voice one last time. "Poor little victim. Maybe next time he'll think twice before terrorizing innocent dogs." The elevator lurched upward, and I stared at my reflection in the polished metal doors. My face was pale, my eyes wide with shock and humiliation. But underneath the hurt, something else was crystallizing. Something cold and calculating. They wanted to make me the villain. They wanted to turn my neighbors against me with lies and memes. Fine. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd show them exactly how dirty this could get. They had no idea what they just unleashed. Back in my apartment, I sat on my couch staring at my phone, trying to work up the courage to look at the building's Facebook page. My arm was throbbing despite the pain medication, and every laugh I'd heard echoing from the lobby kept replaying in my head. Finally, I opened the app. The post was pinned to the top of the Oakwood Apartments residence group. Sarah hadn't just made a meme, she crafted an entire narrative. The post read, "When your neighbor tries to make your friendly dog the villain because they can't handle a playful nibble face with rolling eyes, some people really need to toughen up. Hashtag first world problems, hashtag drama-free 2024 inch." Attached was not just the Chihuahua meme, but a second image, a screenshot of what looked like a text conversation. I squinted at the small text, my blood pressure spiking as I read Sarah's fake dialogue with someone named Jess, where she described me as literally throwing myself at Zeus and then acting like I was mauled by a lion. The comments were worse than Marcus had let on. 53 had grown to 72 in just the 20 minutes since I'd been in the lobby. "This is why I don't trust people who don't like dogs, triangular flag, triangular flag, triangular flag. Bet he's the type to call the cops on kids playing too loud. Sarah, you're a saint for dealing with this. I would have told him off by now. Zeus is literally the sweetest dog in the building. This guy needs therapy." I screenshotted everything before my hand started shaking too badly to hold the phone steady. As I scrolled through comment after comment, I realized Sarah and Marcus hadn't just turned this into a joke, they'd systematically destroyed my reputation in the building. People I'd never even spoken to were weighing in with increasingly creative insults. Then I saw a comment that made my stomach drop. "Wait, isn't this the guy in 2C? He's always seemed off to me. Super antisocial." That was from Tom, the security guard who worked nights. If even building staff were piling on, how was I supposed to live here? How was I supposed to face any of these people? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, saw the Facebook post. "You should probably just drop whatever you're planning with animal control. No one's going to believe you anyway. Cut your losses." Then another, "Seriously dude, take the hint. Move out before this gets worse for you." I set my phone down with trembling hands. They were coordinating this. Sarah and Marcus weren't just mocking me, they were actively trying to intimidate me into silence. The anonymous texts felt like threats, and suddenly my own apartment didn't feel safe anymore. A loud thump from upstairs made me flinch so hard I nearly fell off the couch. Zeus was directly above me, and the sound of his paws on the hardwood floor sent a chill down my spine. Every footstep, every bark, every time he ran across their apartment was a reminder of what had happened. But as I sat there, listening to the dog that had attacked me playing happily above my head while his owner celebrated turning me into a building-wide laughingstock, something clicked into place. I pulled out my laptop and started typing. If Sarah and Marcus wanted to play the social media game, I'd play it better. But first, I needed to do some research. I started with the apartment lease agreement I'd signed 2 years ago, scrolling through pages of fine print I'd barely glanced at before. Then I moved on to city ordinances, animal control policies, and tenant rights. They thought they'd won. They thought their little campaign had broken me. They were about to learn they'd made a critical error. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was methodical. And I was just getting started. I spent the entire weekend buried in research, my laptop screen glowing in the dark apartment as I dove deeper into tenant rights and animal regulations than I'd ever thought possible. What I found made my pulse quicken with something that felt dangerously close to excitement. The Oakwood Apartments lease agreement was a goldmine of violations. Section 12.3 clearly stated that any pet over 50 pounds required additional insurance documentation and a $500 deposit. Section 15.7 mandated that all incidents involving tenant injury must be reported to management within 24 hours. Most interesting was Section 18.2, any pet deemed aggressive or dangerous by management may result in immediate lease termination. But the city ordinances were even better. I'd stumbled across Municipal Code 847.3, which required all dogs involved in bite incidents to undergo a mandatory 10-day quarantine period. Zeus was still running around freely upstairs, I could hear him barking at something every few hours. I was making notes when my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Rachel, saw some posts about you online. Are you okay? This sounds serious. My stomach clenched. What posts? Facebook. Some girl tagged the whole neighborhood group in a post about drama queen neighbors. It has your building name all over it. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sarah had expanded her campaign beyond our building's private group. She was spreading this to the broader neighborhood Facebook groups, where hundreds of people who didn't even know me could join in the mockery. I quickly found the post Rachel was talking about. Sarah had crafted a masterpiece of manipulation, describing me as a completely unhinged neighbor who's threatening to have an innocent family dog destroyed over a tiny scratch. She'd included photos of Zeus looking adorable and innocent, plus screenshots of what she claimed were my aggressive texts to her, messages I'd never sent. The comments were brutal. People from all over the neighborhood were sharing similar stories about problem neighbors and dog-hating psychos. Someone had even created a hashtag Justice for Zeus. My phone rang. It was my apartment building's property manager, Janet. Hi there, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I've been getting some calls about an incident with a dog bite. Can you tell me your side of what happened? Finally, someone in authority was asking for my perspective. I carefully explained the attack, the stitches, the complete lack of accountability from Sarah and Marcus. I see, Janet said when I finished. And you're planning to file an animal control report? I already did. Yesterday. There was a long pause. Well, I have to tell you, I've gotten several complaints about your behavior toward the other tenants. Accusations of harassment, threats. Sarah and Marcus seem very concerned about their safety. My mouth fell open. Threats? I haven't even spoken to them since it happened. They showed me screenshots of some pretty aggressive messages. Those aren't real. I never sent them anything. Another pause, longer this time. Look, I'm not saying anyone's lying. But we need to find a way to resolve this peacefully. Maybe everyone just needs to cool off and move forward. The message was clear, Janet didn't want to deal with this. She wanted me to shut up and go away, just like Sarah and Marcus did. What about the lease violations? I asked. The unreported incident, the lack of proper insurance for Zeus. I'll look into that, Janet said, but her tone suggested she'd do nothing of the sort. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone. They'd gotten to the property manager first. They'd spun their web of lies so effectively that even the person whose job it was to enforce the lease was treating me like the problem. I opened my laptop and scrolled through my research notes. If the system was rigged against me, I'd have to play a different game entirely. Time to see just how deep this rabbit hole went. The animal control officer who showed up at my dorm Monday morning looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Officer Martinez was probably in his 50s, with tired eyes and the demeanor of someone who dealt with one too many neighbor disputes. You reported a dog bite incident? He asked, not bothering to step inside when I opened the door. Yes, last Friday. I have the medical records, photos of the injuries. I started pulling out the folder I prepared, but he waved it away. I already talked to the dog owners upstairs. They said the dog was provoked. My heart sank. That's not what happened. I was just walking down the hallway. Look, kid, Martinez interrupted, I've been doing this for 15 years. 90% of these cases come down to he said, she said. The dog's got no prior incidents, owners seem responsible, and... He glanced at his phone. I've got 3 other calls to get to today. What about the mandatory quarantine? I looked up the city code. The dog's been observed by the owners. No signs of illness or unusual behavior. Case closed unless you want to pursue civil court, which honestly... He shrugged. Good luck with that. He was gone before I could show him the photos of my stitches. I stood in my doorway, watching him disappear into the elevator, when I heard Sarah's voice from the stairwell. Thank you so much, Officer Martinez. We really appreciate you being so reasonable about this whole situation. Marcus's voice joined hers. Some people just want to cause problems, you know. We're just glad Zeus is okay. The stairwell door opened and they emerged, Zeus trotting happily between them. When they saw me standing there, Sarah's face lit up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh good, you met Officer Martinez. He was so sweet. Really understood how traumatic this whole thing has been for Zeus. She reached down to pet the dog's head. Poor baby's been so stressed. Stressed? The word came out strangled. Well, yeah, Marcus said. Having animal control called on him for no reason. It's been really hard on our family. I stared at them, at their complete reversal of reality. Zeus, the dog who had bitten me hard enough to require 7 stitches, was the victim here. They were the ones who'd suffered. The officer seemed really concerned about false reporting, Sarah continued conversationally. Apparently it's a misdemeanor to file fraudulent animal control complaints. Who knew? The threat was crystal clear. They weren't just gaslighting me anymore, they were suggesting I'd committed a crime by reporting their dog. But I'm sure that won't be a problem, Marcus added with a grin. Since you were just confused about what happened, right? These things can be so traumatic, memory gets fuzzy. They waited, clearly expecting me to agree with their version of events. To admit I'd been confused or mistaken about being attacked. Instead, I stepped back and closed my door without a word. Through the thin walls, I heard Sarah's laugh. I think he's finally getting the message. I pressed my back against the door, my bandaged arm throbbing with phantom pain. Animal control was useless. The property manager was on their side. Half the building thought I was a liar and a drama queen. But as I listened to their retreating footsteps, I realized something important. They were getting cocky. In the past 4 days, they'd left a paper trail of lies, fake screenshots, and public posts that could be traced and verified. They thought they'd won, but they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd underestimated how much documentation I'd been gathering. I opened my laptop and started typing. If official channels wouldn't help me, I'd have to get creative. It was time to fight fire with fire. That evening, I discovered just how far Sarah and Marcus were willing to go to bury me. I was scrolling through my work email when I found a message that made my blood freeze. It was from HR, marked urgent, please respond. Hi there, we received a concerning call today from someone claiming to be a neighbor of yours. They alleged some disturbing behavior regarding animal cruelty and threats toward other residents. While we don't typically involve ourselves in personal matters, given the nature of the accusations, we'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss this. Please reply at your earliest convenience. Patricia Williams, Human Resources. My hands were shaking as I read it again. They'd called my job. They'd actually called my workplace to try to get me fired. I immediately dialed HR back, but it went straight to voicemail. It was after hours, which meant I'd have to spend the entire night wondering if I still had a career tomorrow. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, told you to drop it. This is just the beginning. Then another, check your car. My heart hammered against my ribs. I grabbed my keys and rushed downstairs to the parking garage, my mind racing with possibilities. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Someone had keyed deep scratches along the driver's side of my Honda, spelling out, liar, in jagged letters. But that wasn't all. My windshield wipers had been snapped in half, and there was dog shit smeared across my driver's side door handle. I stood there staring at my vandalized car, the garage's fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and felt something crack inside me. This wasn't just about the dog bite anymore. They were systematically destroying my life, piece by piece. Having car trouble. I spun around to find Marcus standing by the garage entrance, Zeus panting beside him. In the harsh lighting, his smile looked almost demonic. Did you do this? I demanded. He held up his hands in mock innocence. Whoa, man. That's a serious accusation. You can't just go around blaming people for random vandalism. That's like harassment or something. I know it was you. Really? Got proof. He pulled out his phone and started recording. Because right now, you're accusing me of a crime with no evidence. That sounds like defamation to me. Zeus strained against his leash, and I instinctively stepped back. The movement made Marcus chuckle. Still scared of dogs. That's so weird. Most normal people love dogs. He moved closer, letting Zeus pull him forward. Zeus here has been wondering why you're trying to hurt his family. Haven't you, boy? The dog's eyes were fixed on me, and I felt that familiar spike of terror. My arm throbbed where the stitches were still healing. Stay away from me, I said, backing toward the elevator. This is a public garage, Marcus replied. I have every right to be here. Just like Zeus has every right to exist without false accusations. He followed me to the elevator, Zeus's nails clicking ominously on the concrete. When the doors finally opened, I practically threw myself inside, jabbing the button for my floor. As the doors started to close, Marcus called out, "Oh, and that thing with your job." That was Sarah's idea. She's really creative when she wants to be. The elevator carried me up, but I could still hear his laughter echoing through the shaft. Back in my apartment, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the photos I'd taken of my vandalized car. My hands were still trembling, but it wasn't just from fear anymore. It was rage, pure, crystalline rage that seemed to burn away everything else. They'd escalated this beyond anything I could have imagined. They were threatening my livelihood, vandalizing my property, stalking me in parking garages. I opened my laptop and looked at all the research I'd compiled over the weekend. Lease violations, city ordinances, documentation of their lies and harassment. I'd been playing defense this whole time, trying to protect myself from their attacks. But Marcus was right about one thing, I had been thinking too small. It was time to go on the offensive. I spent Tuesday morning on the phone with HR, explaining the situation while trying not to sound like the unhinged neighbor Sarah had painted me as. Patricia Williams listened with professional detachment as I described the dog attack, the social media harassment, and what I suspected was a coordinated campaign to damage my reputation. While this does sound like a personal matter, she said carefully, we take any allegations involving our employees seriously. For now, just document everything and keep us informed if it escalates further. It was a diplomatic non-answer, but at least I wasn't getting fired. Yet. After the call, I decided to take a different approach. If animal control wouldn't help and the property manager was compromised, maybe I needed to go higher up the food chain. I spent the afternoon researching the corporate office that owned Oakwood Apartments, digging through their website until I found the contact information for their regional manager. I was crafting a detailed email when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize holding an official-looking envelope. Process server, she announced when I opened the door. Are you the tenant in 2C who filed the animal control complaint? My stomach dropped. Yes. She handed me the envelope with practiced efficiency. You're being sued for defamation and harassment. Have a good day. I closed the door and tore open the envelope with shaking hands. The legal documents inside were thick and intimidating, full of whereas clauses and legal jargon I could barely understand. But the gist was clear. Sarah and Marcus were suing me for $50,000 in damages, claiming I destroyed their reputation and caused them severe emotional distress through my false accusations about Zeus. The list of alleged offenses was staggering. According to the lawsuit, I had aggressively confronted their dog, fabricated injuries to frame an innocent animal, engaged in a campaign of harassment and intimidation, and made false reports to authorities with malicious intent. They'd even included printouts of the building's Facebook posts as evidence, but only the posts mocking me, not their original lies that had started everything. In their narrative, I was a deranged neighbor who'd launched an unprovoked attack on a loving family and their gentle pet. The worst part was how professional it all looked. They'd hired a real lawyer, someone who'd taken their version of events and wrapped it in legal language that made me sound like a genuine threat to society. I was still staring at the papers when my phone rang. Unknown number. Congratulations, Sarah's voice was sickeningly sweet. You're officially being sued by people who actually know how to play this game. This is insane, I said. You're the ones who've been harassing me. Really? Because we have screenshots, witness statements, and a whole Facebook group full of people who think you're unhinged. What do you have? Oh right, a story about being attacked by the sweetest dog in the building. I could hear Marcus laughing in the background. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah continued. You're going to drop the animal control complaint, post an apology in the building Facebook group admitting you overreacted, and then you're going to move out. If you do all that, we might consider dropping the lawsuit. And if I don't? Then we destroy you completely. Your job, your reputation, your credit score when you can't pay the judgment, everything. We've already proven we can turn everyone against you. Don't test us on how much worse we can make your life. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, legal documents scattered around me like evidence of my own stupidity. They'd outmaneuvered me at every turn, always staying one step ahead. But as I reread their lawsuit, I noticed something interesting. In their eagerness to paint me as the villain, they'd made several very specific claims about what had happened that night. Claims that could be verified. Claims that, if proven false, would expose them as the real liars. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. I decided to fight back the only way I knew how, with the truth. But first, I needed proof that would stand up in court. Wednesday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the urgent care facility where I got my stitches. The nurse who treated me, Kelly, remembered the case immediately. Oh yeah, that was a nasty bite, she said, pulling up my file. Dr. Morrison was surprised by how deep it was. We don't usually see puncture wounds like that from playful dogs. The owners are claiming it was barely a scratch, I explained. They're saying I'm lying about how serious it was. Kelly frowned and turned her computer screen toward me. This is the photo we took for your medical record. Does this look like a scratch to you? The image made my stomach turn. My forearm was a mess of deep puncture wounds, swollen and angry, with blood still seeping despite the pressure bandage. It looked exactly like what it was, a serious attack by a powerful animal. Can I get copies of everything? Photos, doctor's notes, the works. Absolutely. And honey? Kelly's voice was gentle. I've seen a lot of dog bites. Whatever they're telling people, that dog is dangerous. Those wounds came from an animal that wasn't playing. Armed with my medical records, I drove to the apartment building's management office downtown. Janet had been dismissive on the phone, but I was betting she'd never actually seen the evidence. I don't really have time for this, she said when I walked into her office. I told you, we just need everyone to move forward peacefully. I placed the medical photos on her desk. This is what moving forward peacefully looks like. Janet glanced down and her face went pale. Jesus. This is from Friday night. 7 stitches, I said. And they're claiming it never happened. They've been telling everyone I faked my injuries. She picked up the photos, studying them more carefully. These are definitely real bite wounds. Now look at this. I pulled out printouts of Sarah's Facebook posts. This is what they've been posting about me. Calling it a playful nibble and a tiny scratch. Janet's expression darkened as she read through the posts. They put this on social media. It gets worse. I showed her the meme comparing me to an overbandaged chihuahua, the fake text screenshots, the neighborhood Facebook posts calling for #justice for Zeus. Holy shit, Janet muttered, then caught herself. Sorry. It's just, this is way beyond anything I've dealt with before. There's more. I pulled out the lawsuit papers. They're suing me for $50,000, claiming I made false accusations. But here's the thing, they made very specific statements in these legal documents about what happened that night. Janet looked confused. Okay. They claim Zeus was on a leash and under control when he defended himself from my aggressive approach. But look at this. I opened my phone to a video I'd taken that morning. This is Zeus in the hallway right now. The video showed the dog running freely through the corridor, no leash in sight, while Sarah called to him from their open apartment door. Zeus was jumping on other residents, sniffing at doors, completely unrestrained. They're claiming he's always leashed in common areas, I continued. But I have timestamps on security footage requests that prove otherwise. They've been violating lease terms for months. Janet was quiet for a long moment, studying the evidence spread across her desk. Why didn't you show me this before? You didn't want to see it before. You wanted this to go away quietly. She nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. This is actually really serious. She looked up at me. What do you want me to do? Enforce the lease. Document the violations. And help me prove that they're the ones who've been lying all along. Janet gathered the photos into a neat pile. I'll need to review their lease agreement and consult with our legal department. This could take a few days. I understand. But Janet? I stood up to leave. They escalated this into a legal battle. Now I'm going to show everyone exactly who the real liars are. As I walked back to my car, my phone was already buzzing with notifications. But for once, I wasn't afraid to check them. The game was about to change completely. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of hammering above my head. Not the usual footsteps or Zeus's barking, actual construction noise at 6 a.m. I stumbled to my window and looked down at the parking lot, where a moving truck sat with its back doors wide open. They were leaving. My phone was buzzing frantically. Text after text from unknown numbers. Heard you got Sarah and Marcus evicted. That's messed up over a tiny dog bite. Hope you're happy ruining a family's life, psycho. Zeus was the sweetest dog. You're sick. But then I saw a message that made my blood run cold. It was from Janet at the management office. Need to see you immediately. We have a problem. I threw on clothes and rushed to her office, my mind racing. When I arrived, Janet's face was grim, and there was another woman I didn't recognize sitting across from her desk. This is Carol Peterson from corporate, Janet said without preamble. We need to talk about your accusations against the former tenants in 3C. Carol opened a thick folder and pulled out a stack of papers. We've completed our investigation into your claims about lease violations and the incident involving the dog bite. My heart started hammering. And the problem is, Carol continued, several of your allegations don't match our findings. The tenants had proper documentation for their pet, including insurance and vaccination records. The dog was properly registered with the city. I felt the ground shifting under my feet. That's impossible. I researched the lease requirements. You researched the old lease template, Janet interrupted. The current agreement has different pet policies. Policies that Sarah and Marcus were following correctly. Carol pulled out more documents. Furthermore, we've reviewed security footage from the night of the incident. The cameras show you approaching the dog, not the other way around. What? No, that's not, I stopped. Security footage. Can I see it? Carol's smile was thin. The footage is property of the building and only shared with law enforcement or in legal proceedings. But I can tell you that it contradicts several statements you made. The room was spinning. This couldn't be happening. I knew what had occurred that night. Zeus had attacked me unprovoked. But now they were claiming to have video evidence proving otherwise. There's something else, Janet said quietly. We found evidence that someone has been accessing our tenant database without authorization. Computer logs show multiple attempts to gather personal information about residents, including employment details and emergency contacts. My mouth went dry. You think The attempts came from your building's Wi-Fi network, Carol said. And they coincided exactly with the timeline of your investigation into the other tenants. I never hacked into anything. I don't even know how to do that. Carol closed the folder with a snap. Mr. Thompson, we're going to need you to vacate the premises within 30 days. This situation has become untenable for everyone involved. You're evicting me. The words came out as a whisper. We're offering you the opportunity to break your lease without penalty, Janet clarified. But yes, we need you gone. I stumbled out of the office in a daze. Everything I thought I'd accomplished, every piece of evidence I thought I'd gathered, it was all crumbling. Somehow, Sarah and Marcus had managed to flip the entire narrative, even after I'd gotten them evicted. My phone rang as I sat in my car. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Surprised? Sarah's voice was honey-sweet with victory. Did you really think we'd just roll over and let you destroy us? How, was all I could manage. Marcus works in IT, sweetie. Amazing what you can accomplish when you know the right people and have access to the right systems. Security footage is surprisingly easy to edit when you have the skills. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. They hadn't just fought back, they'd systematically destroyed every advantage I thought I had. See you around the neighborhood, Sarah said. Oh wait, you won't be in the neighborhood much longer, will you? The line went dead, and I realized my war with them was far from over. The eviction notice arrived 3 days later, delivered by the same process server who'd brought me the lawsuit papers. This time, she looked almost sympathetic as she handed over the envelope. 30 days, she said quietly. Sorry, kid. I stood in my doorway reading the official termination of my lease, my hands numb with shock. The document cited behavior detrimental to community safety and violation of building computer systems as grounds for immediate removal. At the bottom, in small print, was a clause that made my blood freeze. Any attempt to contest the eviction would result in immediate legal action for trespassing and cybercrimes. They trapped me completely. Fight back and face criminal charges, or slink away quietly like the defeated victim they wanted me to be. I was still staring at the papers when Mrs. Peterson's door opened across the hall. The elderly woman who'd once smiled at me in elevators now looked at me with undisguised disgust. I hope you're satisfied, she said, her voice trembling with rage. That poor family had to leave because of your lies. That sweet dog probably ended up in a shelter because of you. Mrs. Peterson, that's not what happened. Don't. She held up a shaking hand. Sarah showed me the security footage before they moved out. I saw you corner that innocent animal. You should be ashamed of yourself. She slammed her door so hard the walls shook. I stood there in the hallway, wondering how they'd managed to convince even my closest neighbor that I was the monster. The security footage Sarah had mentioned, the same edited footage Carol had referenced, was apparently making the rounds. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Rachel. Mom saw something on Facebook about you getting evicted. Please call me back. People are saying really crazy things. The sinking feeling in my stomach deepened. If this had reached my family's social media circles, how far had Sarah and Marcus spread their poison? I called Rachel immediately. What kind of things? Jesus, where do I start? There are posts in like 6 different neighborhood groups calling you an animal abuser. Someone shared a video that supposedly shows you threatening a dog. And there's this whole thread about how you've been stalking and harassing your neighbors for weeks. I closed my eyes. None of that is true. I know that. But Mom's freaking out, and some of her friends are asking questions. One woman said her daughter lives near you and that everyone knows you're unstable. They're destroying me, Rachel. Systematically. Who? The neighbors with the dog. Sarah and Marcus. They're better at this than I am. Every move I make, they're 3 steps ahead. There was a long pause. What are you going to do? I looked around my apartment, boxes everywhere, my life being packed away into cardboard containers. In 3 weeks, I'd be gone, and they'd have won completely. I'd be the cautionary tale neighbors told about what happened when you cross the wrong people. I don't know, I admitted. After hanging up, I sat on my couch surrounded by half-packed boxes and tried to think. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered had been neutralized or turned against me. Every authority figure I'd contacted had been convinced I was the problem. Even my own neighbors looked at me like a dangerous criminal. But as I stared at the eviction notice in my hands, something nagged at me. The document was almost too perfect, too comprehensive in its destruction of my credibility. It felt orchestrated, like someone had known exactly which buttons to push with the management company. I pulled out my laptop and started searching for the corporate ownership of my building. If Sarah and Marcus had inside help, if this went deeper than just their lies, maybe there was still one thread I could pull. Outside my window, I could hear Zeus barking in the distance. They might have moved out, but they were still close. Still watching. Still waiting to see if I'd finally learned my place. I opened a new browser tab and started digging deeper than I'd ever dug before. The war wasn't over yet. My deep dive into corporate records led me down a rabbit hole I never expected. 3 hours of cross-referencing property ownership documents revealed something that made my pulse quicken. The management company that owned Oakwood Apartments had recently been acquired by a larger firm called Meridian Properties. And Marcus Williams was listed as a junior IT consultant for Meridian Properties. I stared at my laptop screen, pieces clicking together like a horrifying puzzle. Marcus hadn't just edited security footage, he'd had legitimate access to it. The unauthorized database intrusions Janet mentioned. Those could have been him, using his company credentials to make it look like the attempts came from my connection. My hands were shaking as I screenshot everything. This was it, proof that they'd been manipulating the system from the inside. But even as excitement flooded through me, a darker realization crept in. If Marcus had access to building management systems, what else could he control? I grabbed my phone and called the building's emergency maintenance line. Hi, this is the tenant in 2C. I'm having some issues with my door lock. It keeps engaging and disengaging randomly. That's weird, the maintenance guy said. Electronic locks don't usually malfunction like that. When did it start? About a week ago. Right around when I'd started getting too close to the truth. I can come take a look tomorrow morning. After hanging up, I tested my keycard on the door. It worked normally, but the paranoia was creeping in. If Marcus could access building databases, could he control other systems too? The locks, the elevators, even the fire alarms. My phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. Found some interesting stuff about you online. Check your email. My blood ran cold as I opened my laptop. In my inbox was a message from someone claiming to be a concerned citizen with attachments that made my stomach drop. Bank statements. Credit reports. Employment records. My entire financial history laid bare, with certain transactions highlighted in red. The accompanying message was brief. Funny how someone claiming to be a victim of harassment has been making some very suspicious purchases lately. Security cameras, recording equipment, GPS trackers, sounds like stalker behavior to me. Would be a shame if this got out. I recognized the purchases, legitimate security equipment I bought to protect myself, all perfectly legal. But presented this way, it looked like I was the one doing the stalking. Another email arrived immediately after. Delete this and the attachments. Don't make copies. You have 1 hour before this gets sent to your employer, your family, and every neighborhood group in a 50-mile radius. This was escalating beyond anything I could have imagined. They weren't just gaslighting me anymore, they were blackmailing me with my own financial information. Information that Marcus could have accessed through his company's systems. I screenshotted everything before deleting it, then immediately backed up the files to a secure cloud account. If they wanted to play with hacked information, I'd make sure there was evidence of their crimes. But my victory felt hollow as I realized the deeper implications. Marcus worked for the company that managed hundreds of apartment buildings across the city. How many other tenants had crossed him? How many people had been quietly destroyed by this same system? My phone rang, startling me. It was Janet from the management office. We need to talk, she said, her voice strained. Tonight. Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street in an hour. Come alone, and don't tell anyone you're meeting me. The line went dead before I could respond. Janet sounded scared, genuinely frightened in a way that made my skin crawl. As I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, one thought echoed in my mind. I was about to discover that my situation was far worse than I'd ever imagined. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table where I could watch both entrances. The paranoia that had been building all week was now in full swing. Every person who walked in could be connected to Sarah and Marcus. Every glance in my direction felt loaded with threat. Janet appeared exactly on time, but she looked nothing like the composed property manager I'd met with before. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, and she kept glancing over her shoulder as she approached my table. Thank you for coming, she said quietly, sliding into the seat across from me. I wasn't sure you would. You sounded scared on the phone. She laughed bitterly. Scared doesn't begin to cover it. She pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. I need to show you something, but first I need your word that you'll never say this came from me. I nodded, opening the envelope. Inside were printouts of internal company emails, dating back several months. As I read through them, my blood turned to ice. The emails were between Marcus and someone named David Chen in Meridian's corporate office. They detailed a systematic plan to remove problematic tenants from various properties by manufacturing lease violations and manipulating building systems to create evidence of misconduct. This is insane, I whispered, scanning email after email. They've done this before. 17 times in the past 2 years, Janet said. Always the same pattern. Target tenants who complain too much, ask too many questions, or threaten to report code violations. Create situations that make them look unstable or dangerous, then document everything to justify eviction. I found an email thread specifically about me, dated 3 days after the dog bite incident. Marcus had written, new target in 2C. Guy's already shaken up from the Zeus situation. Should be easy to flip the narrative and get him out before he causes real problems. The response from David Chen was chilling, approved. Use standard protocol, database intrusion false flag, edited security footage, and social media character assassination. Let's wrap this up quickly. They planned this whole thing, I said, my voice barely audible. The hacking accusation, the footage, everything. Janet nodded grimly. Marcus has been using his access to frame tenants for months. He plants evidence of unauthorized database access, doctor security footage, even manipulates smart lock systems to make it look like people are breaking into other units. Why are you telling me this? Her hands were trembling as she reached for her coffee. Because they're coming for me next. I started asking too many questions about the pattern of evictions. This morning I found a keylogger on my work computer and a hidden camera in my office. The implications hit me like a freight train. How many people know about this? Just me, as far as I can tell. David Chen runs his operation very quietly, and Marcus is careful to only target people who won't be believed. Tenants with mental health issues, people going through divorces, anyone already isolated or vulnerable. I thought about all the neighbors who turned against me so easily, how quickly they'd accepted Sarah and Marcus's version of events. They chose their targets well. There's something else, Janet said, pulling out her phone. I managed to get the original security footage from that night before Marcus corrupted it. She turned the screen toward me, and I watched myself walking down the hallway, groceries in hand, completely minding my own business. Zeus came charging out of the stairwell completely unleashed, no owners in sight, and attacked me without provocation. The real footage matched my memory perfectly. This proves everything, I said. It proves you were telling the truth about the attack. But Marcus has already uploaded the doctored version to our official servers. In any legal proceeding, his version would be considered the authentic building record. Janet closed her phone and looked directly at me. They're not just destroying you, they're destroying me for trying to help you. And if we don't do something soon, they'll destroy anyone else who gets in their way. I stared at the evidence spread across our table, finally understanding the true scope of what we were up against. This wasn't just about a dog bite anymore. It was about a criminal conspiracy that had been operating for years. The next morning, I woke up to find my apartment door wide open. I'd deadbolted the night before, I was absolutely certain. But there it was, hanging open like an invitation, with the morning hallway light streaming across my living room floor. My blood turned to ice as I crept toward the entrance, checking every corner for signs of an intruder. Nothing seemed disturbed. My laptop was still on the coffee table, my wallet on the kitchen counter. But then I noticed something that made my skin crawl, wet paw prints leading from the doorway to my bedroom and back. Zeus had been in my apartment. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called Janet. They got into my unit. The door was wide open when I woke up. What? Her voice was sharp with alarm. That's impossible. Electronic locks don't just malfunction like that. Marcus, I said simply. He has access to the building systems, remember? There was a long pause. Get out of there. Right now. Pack whatever you absolutely need and leave. I'm not running away. This isn't about running away anymore, Janet interrupted. If they're willing to break into your apartment, this has crossed a line into criminal territory. They're escalating. As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope you slept well. Zeus missed his old hunting grounds. My hands were trembling as I screenshot the message. They'd been in my apartment while I was sleeping. They could have done anything, planted evidence, installed cameras, worse. The violation felt like a physical assault. I was throwing essentials into a backpack when I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Through my still open door, I could see Sarah and Marcus talking to Mrs. Peterson, their voices low but urgent. Found evidence of break-in tools in his apartment during the wellness check, Marcus was saying. Poor guy's really lost it. We're just worried about everyone's safety, Sarah added with perfect false concern. The property manager asked us to help keep an eye on things until he gets the mental health support he needs. Wellness check. Mental health support. They were planting a narrative that I was having some kind of breakdown, using the open door as evidence of my deteriorating state. Mrs. Peterson's voice was worried. Should we call someone? His family maybe. We're handling it, Marcus assured her. The important thing is that everyone stays safe. If you see him acting strangely, just give us a call. They were positioning themselves as concerned neighbors looking out for the community. By the time anyone official got involved, they'd have a dozen witnesses swearing I was unstable and dangerous. I finished packing and slipped out through the back stairwell, avoiding the elevator cameras. As I reached my car, another realization hit me. They'd probably been tracking my movements for weeks. My key card, my parking pass, even my cell phone, all potential surveillance tools in the hands of someone with Marcus's access. Sitting in my Honda, I pulled out the burner phone I'd bought the day before and called Janet from a number they wouldn't recognize. They're setting me up for a mental health hold, I told her. Making it look like I'm having a breakdown. Jesus. They're really going for the nuclear option. Her voice was grim. Once they get you committed for psychiatric evaluation, your credibility is destroyed permanently. No one believes the crazy person. What do? We need help. Real help. Someone with the authority to investigate Meridian Properties from the outside. I thought about the emails she'd shown me, the evidence of a conspiracy spanning multiple buildings and dozens of victims. FBI. Maybe. But we need more than corporate emails. We need someone currently being targeted who can prove the system manipulation in real time. A terrible idea was forming in my mind. What if we gave them a target they couldn't resist? Someone who'd be perfect for their system but smart enough to document everything. Janet was quiet for a moment. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to catch them in the act. With federal witnesses. It was insane. It was dangerous. But as I sat in that parking lot, homeless and hunted, I realized it might be the only way to expose the truth before they buried it completely. The war was about to enter its final phase. The FBI took our case seriously once Janet provided the internal emails and I showed them the evidence of system manipulation. Agent Rebecca Torres was assigned as our handler, and within 72 hours, we had a plan. We're going to let them think they've won, Torres explained during our meeting at the federal building. You'll return to your apartment, act defeated and broken. Meanwhile, we'll have surveillance on all their communications and building access logs. The hardest part was walking back into that building knowing Zeus might be lurking in the hallways. But when I swiped my key card, which the FBI had bugged with tracking software, it worked perfectly. Marcus had reactivated my access, probably planning one final humiliation. I spent 3 days playing the broken victim, staying in my apartment, ordering takeout, acting like someone who'd given up completely. Meanwhile, federal agents were documenting every illegal access Marcus made to building systems, every edited security file, every privacy violation. The trap was sprung when Sarah posted in the neighborhood Facebook group that I'd been seen talking to myself and acting erratically in the parking garage. She included a timestamp that matched exactly when I'd been in the FBI field office downtown, something they could only know if they were tracking my movements illegally. Agent Torres called me that evening. We have everything we need. Tomorrow morning, we're executing search warrants on both their properties and the Meridian offices. The takedown was beautiful to watch from my window. Marcus was arrested as he tried to delete files from his laptop, while Sarah was caught with printed copies of my financial records, federal crimes that carried serious prison time. The Meridian offices were raided simultaneously, with David Chen and 3 other executives led away in handcuffs. But the real satisfaction came later, when Janet called with the final tally. 43 victims across 18 properties, she said, her voice filled with amazement. The FBI found evidence going back 4 years. Financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, violation of federal privacy laws, they're looking at decades in prison. The building's Facebook group, once filled with mockery about my dramatic reaction to a dog bite, became a flood of apologies as the truth emerged. Mrs. Peterson left a handwritten note under my door. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. Thank you for stopping them. Sarah and Marcus each pled guilty to avoid trial. Sarah got 8 years for conspiracy and identity theft. Marcus got 12 years for the computer crimes and financial fraud. Their carefully constructed empire of lies collapsed in a matter of weeks. Zeus, the dog that started it all, was rehomed to a family who specialized in aggressive breed rehabilitation. According to the reports I received, he was actually a gentle animal who'd been deliberately trained to be aggressive, just another tool in their scheme to terrorize neighbors. The lawsuit against me was dismissed with prejudice, and Meridian Properties paid a substantial settlement that covered my legal fees, medical expenses, and enough extra to buy a house in a much better neighborhood. 6 months later, I ran into Janet at a coffee shop. She'd been promoted to regional manager after helping expose the conspiracy. Any regrets? She asked. I thought about the stitches that had healed into thin white scars on my arm, the sleepless nights, the weeks of feeling like I was losing my sanity. Then I thought about the 43 other victims who got justice, the criminal enterprise that was shut down, and the satisfaction of watching my tormentors' smug faces as federal agents read them their rights. None whatsoever, I said. Sometimes the best revenge is simply the truth, delivered with federal authority and a lengthy prison sentence.